This shirt and this shirt says a lot about our relationship to art. This put me on a deep dive into a whole economy of art shirts, fast fashion brands. They're made for really fucking cheap, and they're like trying to signal something about taste, about culture, and about style, all by putting some old impressionist piece of art onto a shirt that costs like almost nothing. They're literally everywhere. Like, it is become a huge trend. And I got to wondering, like, why is this happening? Why are we seeing so much sort of an influence of impressionist art on fashion, like becoming a sort of like hype item? And why is it so pervasive in fast fashion? So ties into this. Obviously, it's really fast fashion and like using paintings and older art as a sort of accessory, as just something you have as like almost like a. It's always been about sort of like expressing status and expressing access, and that only certain people are able to interact with it and have it in their home and own it. You know, it's sort of associated with the rich and those who are royal and who can sort of pay for someone to paint their landscape or paint them as a subject. Art has always sort of been about exclusivity. This narrative occurs again and again in popular media. Glass Onion was a great example of sort of tied to the excesses of the rich, and it used a lot of very contemporary art. Maybe not the literal versions, but it invoked a lot of things like the Mona Lisa. To me, this was one of the sort of biggest examples of this when Beyonce and Jay-Z shot their music video for Apeshit in the Louvre with all this art. And they literally shut down the Louvre to make this video. Obviously, how else could you do it? And it really said something about like, you know, we can do this. We can afford this. This is something that is exclusive to us. We can have this as our accessory. One of the biggest museums in the world with some of the biggest art pieces in the world. It said a lot about like obviously racial politics on the global scale and about class, but still, at the end of the day, these are rich people who could literally buy a museum as an accessory, which says it all. None of these people started it by themselves. I think Kanye West sort of like really popularized this idea of art as accessory with his work with people like George Condo and for his, you know, Twisted Fantasy album cover art. He was one who really sort of like connected the dots between art as an accessory to life and lifestyle and all that sort of thing. We're way beyond that now. Like, Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West and that sort of era of Kanye was over 15 years ago, obviously. And now it has sort of evolved into a very different way where you have it on these fast fashion shirts. And it's, again, impressionism, which is this idea of life, but it's not very precise. It's a little bit abstract. It's sort of like the idea of, you know, obviously the art, but also of being rich, but it's not really. It's just a sort of like a frazzled picture of what is actually real. I don't think that sort of metaphor is hard to see, that like you're projecting this sort of relationship to creativity, this relationship to being rich, all that sort of stuff. It's pretty obvious. You're literally wearing it on your chest. What makes this more concerning is that like the art world is in on it too. I think MoMA's collaboration with Uniqlo, generally Uniqlo's whole thing, like I think they sort of helped to really kick off this feeling that you can own some art, and like this $10 shirt is akin to a Warhol or a Haring or a Basquiat. Like, you can afford great art, and like something about that is beautiful and utilitarian. I think Warhol will love that, but it's not true. Like, you're supporting fast factory systems, which are the exact opposite of, say, high art. And unfortunately, fashion plays into this too. I think Jonathan Anderson is maybe the best example of fashion connecting the dots to art as sort of like an accessory. And what Jonathan is doing isn't inherently bad or wrong. I think the issue is that by connecting art, things that should be, say, reflective of our time, that take craft by one human in some ways, or collectives and whatever, to sort of develop and process life and express it in one way, that being sort of like minimized down into a t-shirt or a jacket or whatever. And like, granted, these are probably works of art in and of themselves. Like, yes, that is true. What Jonathan Anderson was doing was art, or is art in some ways. But by putting it on a shirt, it sort of shows that like, this is something to be consumed and to be made disposable, to not take seriously,
That's where it gets really tricky, and that's why fast fashion is gotten into it as well, is because it's like, this is something that is only supposed to be worn for 10 times and it's over, or however long until it's out of fashion, you throw it away, you give it away, or whatever. By equating sort of like one of the most fundamental parts of human creativity to disposability, because that's what fashion in the modern sense does, is really problematic. And it pairs really poorly with things like AI technologies also saying, we don't need human creativity. We can do it as a machine. You then go fucking make drinks at a Starbucks because you don't have a job anymore. So this is where it's getting really concerning. And like, I think seeing somebody wear their cute Cezanne shirt by Pull & Bear is fine, whatever. It seems benign. They're cute. I don't hate them, actually. But I think this trend is getting at something in our subconscious that means that like, or is trying to express that we no longer care about like the human hand and like what art is. And that is really scary and concerning and a tragedy, given the state of the arts now, given the state of creativity and how people are being forced out of it. Artists bring us joy. None of this is joyful. It's about profit. It's about making ideas flat. It's about making you think less and not consider the world around you.